It's a great study. It is the practical study. It is the answering of practical questions that go on in a church. I know a lot of times we'll spiritualize a lot of things, and we try to just pull scripture here or there to try to make something fit. 1 Corinthians, when you do that, you'll mess it all up. It has to be dealt with in a larger context as Paul walks through, especially tonight when we're going to see. We've been lucky, and I've been able to get you out of here at, say, 8:30, 8:45. And so we've worked with 13 scriptures, 21 scriptures. Look at the person beside you and say, we got 40 scriptures. So I hope you ate good. 10 o'clock, it's not bad. It'll get us out of here, and we'll be good. No, I'm going to try to knock it out, and we're just going to have to mow through. It's not complicated, but I need to be able to answer stuff as we go. Now, let me give you a backdrop to what we're fixing to deal with tonight. I've entitled this, I guess the best way to entitle this thought that we're going to do is good or bad, better or best. Good or bad, better or best. That is what Paul is dealing with here when he's dealing with chapter 7 of 1 Corinthians. He is walking you through a thought process of a question that has been asked, and a question that is causing trouble in the church. I know we always talk about, well, you know, the guy living with his mother is a bad situation. Well, this one is too. This one, in fact, historians would say that this is probably one of the greatest blemishes on the Christian faith that there was in the early church. I know it sounds hard, but in the early church, this was probably what hurt us more than anything else in society. It was the fact that if someone became a Christian, their marriage blew up. Their marriage fell apart. Or the person who got saved left the marriage. It was a misunderstanding among churches and what being holy really was. And it was causing problems all the way through. Historians wrote many times that this was one of the greatest blemishes on the early church. And so what Paul is doing here, Paul is affirming marriage and affirming celibacy, but he's doing it through the Christian thought. Let me just read it this way. Again, Paul will affirm celibacy, but not because of sex itself is something evil. He is affirming it because to the Corinthians thought, instead, the unmarried state can be superior because it offers a person more time, more ability, more energy to give to God. So when I say this, good or bad, better or best, what we're talking about is this question that we're fixing to deal with. And to the Corinthians, they thought that being celibate was the highest level that you could be. So much so that they would tell their wives and their husbands, me and you are never going to have intercourse anymore for the rest of our marriage because I'm going to wholly give myself to God. How many would say that's a bad strategy? It was a horrible strategy. But this is what Paul is dealing with. You know, this is the question. So let's jump in. I want you to have this mindset that the question that's been asked is, should I stay married but just be celibate? Should I just give myself totally? Should I just walk away from my wife or my husband? Should I give myself completely to God? What is right? And if I'm not married, should I get married? Here's Paul dealing with the question. So beginning with verse 1 and 2, let's jump in. He's going to answer this question. Now, for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. Now, that sounds just blatant, like, okay, there's your answer. It's good to not have any relations that way with a woman. Verse 2. But, and you'll hear it in your translation, maybe in your Bible, nevertheless, he's saying, okay, I know I'm telling you point blank that the highest level is to say that I'm going to live my every day, 365, I'm going to live 24/7, serving God, loving God, working at the mission field, going to the soup kitchen, giving every bit of energy I got to win every soul. How many would say that is the greatest life you could possibly live? Sure. How many of you say, I don't want that life? Sure. And this is the answer. So let's walk through. But since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband. So, understanding that this is the answer to his question. He says, the highest level is to live, yes, where no relations and you're totally committed to God. But this is not healthy for everybody. But if you choose to step into a relationship, do not do an immoral. We've already dealt with the immoral relationships he's talked about. He said, but find you a wife or find you a husband. Now, this shouldn't be the only reason you get married, but it is one of the main reasons that a person as a Christian would choose to get married. It would be that alone, I cannot be the person that I need to be. I'm not as healthy alone as I am with someone. Any questions? Boy, it's going to be a quiet bunch tonight. No questions tonight, right? All right, let's go. Verse 3. The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. Pull these up in the, let's just say the King James, because there's certain words here I won't pull out that are not in this translation. If we can swap that. And even the New King James. Okay. It translates better here, if that's okay. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, or render unto his wife the affection that's due her. Your translation may bring it out that way. That he should render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise the wife to her husband. Now, this goes beyond just the intercourse mindset. It goes into how I'm going to treat this other person. The affection that I'm going to give to this person. Listen to what he says. Let's keep reading and we'll come back to this. The wife hath no power over her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband has no power over his own body, but the wife. He says, when you enter into this marital relationship, if you are someone that says, I do not do well alone, well, understand that when you enter into this relationship, then you are saying that I'm giving my body to this other person. And unless they're asking you to do something that's immoral or that does not in any way feel as you understand, I'm not going any further. Does that make sense? Then you are to give. I've had, through the years, it's some of the funniest things you'll have, like married couples will come to me and I mean, things like this. Pastor, I got to talk to you. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. My husband does not like me to sleep with clothes on. He likes me to sleep. I said, good. Get a good heater. And they're like, well, I said, you're the only thing he's got to look at, sweetie. And if he wants to sit there and look at you, you better be happy he's wanting to look at you. Well, I don't know. You gave your body to him. And he gave his body to... Now here again, if he's asking something that's immoral, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is inside the healthy marital relationship, there is no perfect It is what fits you two that binds you together in a healthy marital relationship. Yeah. So if you were that woman and you wanted to fix that problem, what would you do? Well, I'd probably just tell him, I like the air conditioner on 59. For long, he's going to look at you and say, it's cold in here. We got to get some clothes on. Problem solved. I don't think it worked that way. But so you're understanding Paul's mindset. The wife hath no power over her body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband does not have power over his own body. You're giving something of yourself. When you get married, I know we just think we're just getting married. And no. Paul took marriage very serious. It was not that he disliked marriage. He understood that if you're going to step into this, this is a bondage that you are choosing to enter into. And it's a wonderful bondage. I love my bondage. It's kept me good for 30-something years in my mind, in my body. I have somebody that I can roll over and hold. I have someone I can wake up in the morning. I have someone I can hug when I need to hug. I have someone I can talk to. It's all wonderful. But if you think it does not come with some amount of sacrifice, you're not married. Right? Amen. Amen. It comes with a sacrifice. And that's all Paul is saying here. So verse 5. Do not defraud ye not one of the other. The word defraud there literally means to cheat. It means you've sold me something, now you've cheated me. You sold me something, a bag of goods, but you cheated me out of it. You told me, when you stood up there, I love and cherish you, cling only unto you as long as we... And you ain't been no clinging. And you hadn't been doing no cherishing, and you hadn't been doing any... Didn't you realize that was part of the... So all of a sudden, he says, don't defraud one another, except it be for the consent for a time that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. So there are times when I'm saying to my partner, look, physically, emotionally, mentally, I've got to pull away and get close to God. I've got to get close to God here. And as I get close to God right here, I'm going to have to pull away from you. But unless it's a God reason, there is no other reason. Unless there's a God reason, there is no other reason to say, no. And so Paul explains this. And come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your Do not deprive one another then, except for the consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again, so Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So he says, listen, the whole purpose of this married relationship in this sense, and the answering to your question, because remember now, what's the question that's being asked? Always let's go back, because we'll keep going down a rabbit hole if you don't. What's the question that he's answering? Yes, should I, when I get saved, live a celibate life? That's the question. Even though I'm married, should I tell the person I'm married to, that's it, I'm God's. I can't, I'm going to totally give myself. Is that correct? Or if I'm single, should I say I'm never getting married because that would be unholy, ungodly? This was the controversy they were having in Corinth. And you can see why in the early church this was causing tremendous problems. Because people would get saved and decide, well, that person isn't saved and they're not treating me or they aren't doing, and so therefore I have a right to leave. what they were promoting was sex outside, but not sex inside. The Corinthians were much more comfortable having prostitutes, but not marriages. Let me say it this way. In this area, Satan has one goal. One goal. And if he can accomplish this goal, he will destroy your marriage. He either tempts you to make you think that sex is better outside your marriage, and therefore you go outside to find it, and you focus on the outside. Or, if he can get you inside a marriage and to make you think that I'm not attracted or do not want or am not going to give myself to the other person. So either way, he wins. He destroys your marriage. If he can get you to be a person who's married, say me, Tim, you're married. I want to attack you at this area. How am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to always tempt you that the girl in the magazine, the girl on the movie, the person outside, the other lady down the street, the whatever, that would be so much better than what you have. And he says, if I can't get you to do that, Tim, then what I'm going to do is while you're sitting side by side on with your wife on the couch, I'm going to make you think, I'm not even attracted to her. It's not even fun. It's not. Either way, I win. So we have to, as Christians, focus on the fact that we do not find our fulfillment outside, but we work to finding our fulfillment on the world struggles with this every day. They lose every day. And they use phrases like, well, we fell out of love. No, you didn't. You just took the bait that was laid. And Paul says, don't accept the temptation that Satan is going to bring to you, that it's either better out there or what I have isn't fun. Any questions? So do not cheat, or the word there is do not deprive. Render unto the wife the affection that's due to her. Render unto her what is due. Not just the physical, because this is where men and women are going to differ some. Because when he uses this word affection, he doesn't just use the word, intercourse. He's using affection. Why? Because to a man, they're the same. To a woman, they're not. That's why he begins here. He doesn't say to the woman first. He says, women, render to your husband. He says, men, render to your wife affection. And women, then do the same. Because if I tell women to do that before the men do, it won't work. Because women can't mentally go that direction. There's an old saying that says, when does a woman start making love? When? When she wakes up in the morning. When does a guy make love? 10 minutes before, if not quicker. Yep, sounds good. Let's go. With her, what did you say to me this morning? Because if you said something ugly to her this morning, by 6 o'clock tonight, you'd be like, what's wrong with you? Nothing. Hey, you want to fool around? No. You girls better help me. I'm trying to help you here. When is he supposed to start? In the morning. First thing he rolls over is like, whoo, you're the best looking woman I've ever seen. Oh, now we're starting to head somewhere. Man, we're going somewhere. Take something right on the mirror and whoo, I'm thinking about you all day. Oh, call her. Do whatever. You're preparing her because remember now, render unto her the affection that is due her. And here's what happens is, and I'll just make this real simple for you. When you do that, you will have the woman of your dreams. If you don't do that, you will start looking outside, wondering, why don't my wife act like that one? Well, if you treated her like you should, she would become that. I knew you would love this chapter. So let's say it this way. This is Satan's great advantage. He's going to win a victory either way he can get you to go here. So verse 7 through 9, let's go a little further. For I wish that all men were even as I myself. Now Paul, have to understand that Paul probably at one time was married, but either his wife has died or she's left him when he converted. We don't know the history, but what we know is that through the Pharisee or Sanhedrin that he was a part of, most men were married at 20. In fact, they could not be a member of the Sanhedrin, which, remember when Stephen was stoned, who gave the okay for it to be done? Paul. Paul was part of that court. He was able to give a okay for them to stone Stephen. So historians would say if he was in that rank, he could not be in that rank. You could not be part of the Sanhedrin without, in fact, there is a Jewish teaching that if you were not married and you were this way, you were as bound for hell as anybody because you were not fulfilling what God's law had required, which was to marry and to reproduce. So whatever state Paul was in, Paul is perfect at being able to explain this. He will even later talk about widows and talk about people who do not have marriages anymore. And Paul, for some reason, we know that when he's writing this to the Corinthians, he has something of a foothold where he can speak to them and they respect him. For I wish that all men were even as I myself, but each one has his own gift from God. The best is what? Committing yourself totally to God. That's the best. But that's not everybody's gift. Some people's gift is marriage. Some is singleness. Some is to be a widow. Some is to be a widower. Some is... Each one of us have a different gift that we have to carry to display and show Christ. For I wish that all men were as me, but each one has his own gift from God. One in this manner and another in that. Verse 8. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them to remain even as... Here again, what's he answering the question for? Which is better? Which is best? I really wish I could preach this chapter to my teenagers all the way to my 30-year-olds, because this would be a powerful understanding for them and in their context of what my life is meant for. Does that mean I don't need to get married? No, it's not saying that. But what it's saying is that don't be discouraged because God has given you this gift, or God has given you this gift, or you're not here, or you're not better than, or you're not. See, remember the Corinthians were always trying to figure out who was better than who, which one could shout the loudest, which one had this word, or which one had this. Well, this was another area. Oh, I'm more holy than all of it. Why? I left my wife, left my marriage, and committed to God, and I live alone. Oh, man. Wow, what a godly man. No, you just destroyed your marriage. Each one has a gift. But if they cannot exercise control, look at the person beside you and say, this is not the only reason to get married, but it's a good one. Let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with... Yes. It's better to get married than to struggle, and we're not talking about just normal temptation. We're not talking about normal, I just have, I would like to get married one day. We're talking about somebody who their life comes unhinged. And we know people and have met people that, man, I'm telling you, they need somebody. They are not doing good by themselves. Amen? And that's okay, because what they're doing is, that is a gift they need in their life because that's the way God made them. One of the saddest and the most beautiful things I ever deal with is when an older couple sometimes dies. It's amazing to me to watch some. I had my grandmother who, when her husband died, she lived another nearly 30, 40 years. My mother-in-law. And then I've seen some that it wasn't probably 6 months to a year after their mate had died. What happened? They died. Or remarried. But they would have to have done one or the other. Because why? Part of their gift was that they do not do well. That's right. And that's okay. And it doesn't make one better or another. And this is what Paul is trying to teach. It does not make you a better person or a worse person because I like to have someone there. Or I'm okay without someone there. It doesn't make me better or worse. It just means that I've been given this gift. But if that cannot exercise control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Verse 10. Now to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. A wife is not to depart from her husband. But even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. Now here's where I'm talking about. He's talking about, okay, I've given my life to the Lord. I'm living with this unsaved person, and it's not good. What should I do? Somebody talk to me. What should I do? What should I do? Get them in church. Try your best. Get them in church. See if we can find a place to live together in peace. That's the goal, to live in peace together. What if we can't find any peace? What am I to do? But even if she does depart, let her. In other words, do not leave your unsaved husband or wife to marry the Christian guy on the third row. If the situation is not good, then what am I to do? Can't stay with them, man. It's a bad situation. Do what? Live alone. To show an example, I am to live alone. And if I'm ever to do marriage again, who am I to do it with? Back to my husband. Or back to my wife. How many says, I don't like this theology? I've never heard anybody preach this crazy stuff, Pastor. I know you haven't, because you'd run off most preachers if they preach this stuff. But this is biblical. This is the way you are to live. A Christian person is to say, because of my testimony, if Elise today decided, I don't love you anymore, I'm leaving, then what am I to do? I am to live alone. Me and God, unless me and Elise could work it out somewhere into the future. Well, I've been doing this for like 6 months. Yep. Try 60 more years. Because you are now to give yourself, and you are to be an example to them. Listen, and a husband is not to divorce his wife. He says basically, you're the same way. You can't go give away your wife because she's not living the way you're living now. But even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried and reconciled. A husband is not to divorce his wife. Verse 12. But to the rest, I, not the Lord, say, if any brother has a wife who does not believe and she is willing to live with him, okay, so here we go. He says, if you got some bad situation, then live alone, serving God, hoping that one day you two can come back together. But if I'm living with someone who does not believe, but they're not so bad, they're a good person, and it's not great. I wish they were saved. I wish they would go to church. I wish they would. It's not bad. Then what am I to do? Huh? Stay with them. I didn't say it was good, Brother Lot. I know, but it's not bad. This is where some of those great pastors will look at you and say, you picked them. And as a Christian, if any brother has a wife who does not believe and she was willing to live with him, let him not divorce her. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, if he is willing to live with her, let her not divorce. What does he mean, not willing? Listen to me. As long as you're with someone who doesn't belittle or try to ruin your salvation or try to pull you away from Christ or try to destroy your relationship with God, and they respect your life, they respect that you live for the Lord, and you're gonna live with morals, and you're gonna live serving, then okay. Then it's okay. We have tons that throughout the years in this church, one partner started coming way before both of them started coming. Lord, we got tons that started that way. Wives or husbands, or hey, just be praying, or my wife isn't coming yet, or my husband isn't coming yet. And that's okay, because if you can live in a way, here's the correct way to do it, that I'm trying to win them to the Lord. This is what the next verse says. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the... So, your first ministry field is your home. And the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. So here's what we're saying. Let me say this very carefully. There are times when there needs to be breakups, or there needs to be divorce, there needs to be maybe because of infidelity, and there's multiple reasons why it's not safe. But if a Christian and even a non-Christian decide that, hey, we're going to annul our marriage because we just don't get along, it's not working, but we got children, and we split, and I got my house and you got your house, what's going to happen? Turmoil. Somebody's living that. And it's turmoil. It's chaos. It is a major problem. Paul says, you will raise unclean children. That's brutal, Pastor. I didn't write it. But he's telling the truth. Because what's going to happen? Here, when they come to your house on the weekend, you're going to carry them to church, and you're going to do all this, and you're going to go, oh, we're going to do this. And when they go to a dad's house, how's it going to be? Yeah, there's beer in the refrigerator, there's the girlfriend's coming over, and it's and what's going to happen to the child in between that situation? We're not saying it's a bad child. We're not saying but what's going to happen to the child? They become unclean. They're saturated with stuff that they should never be saturated. They have to deal with stuff they should never have. They have to make decisions at 12 and 13. Which one you going to live with? I'm 13 years old. What do you mean I got to decide which one I love? Well, you're going to choose her. Does this make sense? Some of you live this. And it took years to become clean and to let go of some of the hurt and to forgive because what we think is, well, we're doing it for the kids. No, you're not. You're going to raise unclean children. So before you decide it's bad or we can't, you better really think it out. There are moments and times where it's unsafe, and yes, you need to get out of there. But there are times, hey, they're not abuse. It's not a bad situation. They're not doing. I wish they would go to church where I wish. And you know what? For the sake of your family, you'd better walk it out. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, the unbelieving wife sanctified. Otherwise, your children would be unclean. But now they are holy. As long as you're in this state, they're holy. Why? Because they have an everyday influence. They have someone in the house every day that even if the other one's drinking and even though the other one's just totally a jerk, you've got somebody in the house that at least is rubbing holy and putting good things and speaking good things in their life on a continual basis. Verse 15. I got to move. But if the unbeliever departs, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. If the unbeliever says, I just can't deal with this, I can't live with this, then don't feel like I've done something unholy, I've done something bad. No, in this case, you're not going to relinquish your relationship with Christ to keep them. And if they say, unless you leave Christ, unless you leave this church, unless you just start, that's not happening. Then you let them do what? Hit the road, Jack. And you're okay. But now you can't sabotage your marriage to get there. Remember now, your body doesn't belong to... I know what you're thinking. All right, so I got to live with them till they leave, but when they leave, I'm good. But you have to live in a Christian way that is trying every day to influence them for Christ. You are responsible to sanctify them. Your job is to live a life in front of them that would be such examples that they would believe that there's a God. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you'll save your wife? You already got it figured out? You already know? You don't know. You don't know if God's going to wake them up in the middle of the night tomorrow night in sweats. And if you see Johnny Cox in here sometimes, just know that's the way it works. When Jean started coming with her girls, Johnny was way out there. There were several things that took place. I'm not going to go into details, deaths and different things that took place that totally got his attention. I was hiring him to come mow my grass when I could afford it, to talk with him at the picnic table and try to put a word in him here. And Jean was praying. And on a Wednesday night, while I was even gone, I wasn't even preaching, which made me mad. Because if anybody deserved to be the one that prayed with him, I deserved it. On a Wednesday night, Jean's been praying, fasting, living in front of it. This has not gone on for a year. This has gone on for 6 years. We're in this building now. And on a Wednesday night, walking down the aisle, because he woke up that morning with hives, and he thought he was dying. And he thought, if I die, I'm going to hell, because my wife's done told me all about it for the last 6 years. And it scared him so bad that he walked in that night, gave his life to the Lord, and of course the rest is history. For how do you know, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, O husband, whether you will save your wife? But as God has distributed to each one, as the Lord has called each one, so let him walk. And so I ordain all in all the churches. In other words, he says, so this is my teaching. Any questions about his teaching? Any questions? Any confusion? Sometimes you can understand it, doesn't mean you like it. But this is the teaching that he teaches on this. Was anyone called while circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Was anyone called while uncircumcised? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing, but keeping the commandments of God is what matters. Okay, so I'm going to read a few of these verses and I'm going to explain what it means, okay? Can I help? Let each one remain in the same calling in which he was called. When you're called while a slave, do not be concerned about it. But if you can be made free, rather use it. For he who is called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who is called while free is Christ's slave. You were bought at a price, and do not become slaves to men. Brethren, let each one remain with God in that state in which he was. Okay, so what in the world is this section about? How many of you were unsaved when you had, let's say, promiscuous lifestyle? Or you had your first marriage? You weren't saved. It went horribly wrong. Now you're married again, second marriage, and you get saved. And you got kids with the other person. What do you do? Who said it? Stay there. Whatever state you were in, when you finally got right, that's the state you're in. Do not go, if you got saved uncircumcised, then don't go all back to the doctor and say, I'm not really saved unless I... Don't, if you were married before and you divorced, and don't care if it happened 4 times, don't go back to the first husband and say, I got saved, so I need to come back to you. If you were a bank robber, whatever you were before, that was before. When you got saved, whatever you were before is over. Whatever state, if you were a slave when you got saved, then even though you may still be a slave, you are a freed man by Christ. Remain in the state that you are in now that God has saved you. The devil will wear people out with, oh man, there's so much stuff. I don't know if I need to go back and do that. Don't. I'm sorry for all the hurt, and I'm sorry for all the best thing you'll ever do is realize that I started living on this date, and everything that happened before, I was a dead man. Because I cannot go back and fix all the stuff that was before. But if you go down that in your mind, I promise you the devil will sit with you every day and remind you of if you really were saved, you sure wouldn't be living still in this, and you still wouldn't be. Don't have that conversation. This is why Paul puts this in here. So whoever you are in this room that hey, my past, some things, when I came into this relationship with Christ, I brought a lot of stuff to that point. It's okay. We all did. The key thing to know is that when I got saved, that day became my new birthday. And that day is the day I started living. And whatever state I was in at that moment, God says, that's where I'm holding you. I'm holding you right there. Now start living for me from this moment on, from there. Does that make sense? Any questions? No questions. Am I doing okay? All right, good. Now concerning virgins. Now this it's different in our mindset. This means a man or a woman. It means me having a child. It'd be like my daughter. So concerning my daughter, who is not married, who has not been given, because remember, how do marriages take place in this time? Prearranged. So who would have to give the virgin away? father. So if I'm a father and I'm saved, I'm a saved father, so I'm like, I'm not giving my daughter to anybody because that would be sin. I'm not giving my son to anybody because they need to give themselves completely to God. It'd be wrong to do that. Now, concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in His mercy has made trustworthy. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not go seek a wife. Remember now, what is Paul saying is the best? To be fully committed to God. You have to always keep this in the question. What is the question? What is the best I can do to be fully committed to God? Not to ever look for anything in this world to supply something more than God can give me, unless it's part of the calling on my life. If marriage is part of that calling, then let it be. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. So what he's saying is, fathers, if you give your daughters to be married, you have not done what? Not done a bad thing. Give your daughters to be married. It's okay. If you give your sons to be married, it's okay. You haven't done any. Remember now, the Corinthians now are struggling with this because Paul is heavy on this basically moral sin, this sexual immorality. That's huge in Corinth. We've talked about that at length. And so Paul is trying now to weed out the new little stuff that pops up when you answer the old question. So he's told them, look, you need to be committed to God. You can't just use your bodies anyway. Oh, so we're just supposed to totally give our bodies and never be with anybody. No, that's not what I'm saying. It'd be great if you did. Sure solve a lot of problems. But it's not accurate. It's not the only way to live your life. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. I told you the same thing. If you get married, what are you doing? Do what? Yeah, but if you get married, even if it's what God called you to do, what are you getting into? A commitment. I like say it with you. It's like it's a commitment. It's the that Paul is talking about. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's like if you're married, you're like, yeah. Let me tell you about it. Tell you some stuff I didn't know and I didn't expect and stuff that came along I didn't realize, and this was not what I had. It's nothing wrong, but just understand, Paul says, but I would spare you. If it's not what you were meant to be and you try to think that that's going to make me happy, let me spare you. But if you know within your heart, I'm better with someone, then that's good too. There's nothing wrong with that. But this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as those who have. So Paul says, let me share with you how I think, how I live my mindset, is that when is the Lord coming? Any minute, any time. Now, Paul would feel like we feel today in a lot of ways. Because remember we talked last week about Nero and about his culture and the Rome. Paul was living in a culture, it can't get no worse, he thinks. It can't get any worse than this. Nero got so bad, he's just wrapping Christians in cloths, dipping them, pouring oil on them, and lighting them for torches at night. I mean, this is chaos. And he's thinking, it'd have to get better to get bad. And he says, seeing all that we see right here, brothers and sisters, live your life like this is the last day of your life. Now, I'm not going to tell you that. One of the flaws, and you'll notice in Paul's stating sometimes he'll say, this is not from Christ, this is from me. You notice me saying that a few times through these writings. This was not of the Lord. This was not something that was just passed down. This was not. It doesn't mean it's not accurate. It just means you need to be really careful with how far you take this. Because Paul in his time took it to where God is coming back What did Paul not see? 2,000 years, what Paul didn't see. When I was growing up, and ever so often, there'll be a season, year 2000 or something. And if you've lived long enough, you lived through one of those seasons where, hey, man, it's coming. I mean, it's coming. People start writing books about it. It's coming. I mean, I'm telling you, it's just right on the. And they start writing songs, and it's just any day now. But I'm going to tell you something. You can only keep people living on the edge for so long before they're like, okay. And what happens? It ain't ever happening. So I'm not going to look at you and say, guys, live your life like just any second. I mean, just go buy some white tennis shoes, sell everything you got, and live in a camper because it's any. No. But at the same time, I'm trying to tell you, be leaning toward this instead of leaning away. Don't live in a way that as you feel it coming, that you're so bound by the world that you can't move that way. Does that make sense? Because I grew up during that season. I grew up, man, being scared every day of my life, waking up thinking the rapture done took place, and the movies came out. Anybody watch them old videos, man, we had to watch back growing up? Man, they scare the bejeebies out of us. We were like 5, 10 years old kids. I mean, the judgment seats and stuff. I mean, it was really bad quality, but man, if you're 5, you're sitting there in the church and they're playing that stuff, you're like, I'm going to hell. It's all it is to it. I'm done. I mean, you just knew it. If the righteous scarcely make it, Lord, I'm thinking, if Paul barely made it, if Peter barely made it, where's Tim Lott? I ain't got a chance. And that was the way I was raised, and there was nothing wrong. That was just that was the time that we lived in. And it's like, boy, we're gonna just preach it, and but you can only keep me here for so long. Finally, it's like, any day now, I'm like, yeah. And so Paul says, but this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they have none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. And those who use this world as not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be without care. Now, this is the part where Paul is bringing it back off the edge. I want you to live your life without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the... Yeah. If you're unmarried and you're a Christian, everything is for the... I told you that's the best way. Otherwise, you got to buy your kid's car, and you got to pay electric, and guess what? You like, I'd love to help you, but I got no money. And all he thinks about is how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the... I don't care how good a person you are, how godly a person you are. A person who's married has to think about the things of the world. Why? Because you got mouths to feed and bills to pay. And I've spent my son now is 29, almost 30 years old, so I've spent the last 30 years of my life from the time me and Elise started having children, 30 years now of giving, not everything to the Lord, but having to work that in a balance with all the things that I'm responsible for. It's not bad or good. It just is. I wouldn't trade one day. I got to go fishing with my son today, and it was watching us walk around the pond. And it was the greatest. I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world, and money could not pay for that. But at the same time, I think of all I could have done with the money I spent on that sucker. And that's all Paul is saying. Think about what you're fixing to invest in. Look at the person beside you you're married to, or look at the person and tell them, you're a big investment in my life. Look at them. They are, whether you like it or not. You are a big investment in my life. Now smile at them and say, I like it that way. Yeah, I like it that way. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It almost makes you feel guilty if you do, but it's not. It's wonderful. For some of us, hey, I'm good. Verse 34. There's a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both body and spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world. I see my girls up here singing sometimes, my teenage girls and different things. And only thing they're worried about is their hair, and they're worried about this, and then I see Jennifer, and Jennifer comes up on the stage, and she's got a kid in the back, wrapped up in a blanket. She's got one that's got running a fever, and Jim's back there, and I'm thinking, there's a difference. There's a totally different mindset. And he says, whether male or female, you don't have the weight. Don't let the enemy make you think, oh, if I could just find somebody, man, it would be so much. It's different. But it doesn't make life perfect. It just makes it different. How she may please her husband. So not only you got to have the kids, and then she's got her husband she's got to go home to, she's got to do all. I'm thinking, boy, there's a big difference. Big difference. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you. I love how Paul says that. This I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, that you may serve the Lord without distraction. Notice now, Paul's always going to go back to what's the best. Just if you're single in any way, as a widower, if the person left you, if you haven't got married yet, the best is to serve the Lord with everything you got. Be thankful. Just give Him you got all the time and energy, give it to Him. But if any man thinks he is behaving improperly toward his daughter or his son, if she is past the flower of youth, and thus it must be, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let them marry. In other words, it goes back to what I just said. The whole context of this was, if you have a daughter, a son, it's okay to marry. Quit trying to put your beliefs on them. You can't do that. You can't look at your daughter or your son and say, well, you don't need to marry. You just need to give your life wholly to God. I'm not really good at this. It's okay. Nevertheless, he who stands steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and has so determined in his heart that he will keep his virgin, does well. So then, he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who does not give her in marriage does. I hate Paul always doing that. I mean, he's not going to, if you're waiting for Paul to let up on this, he's not going to. Is it good for my sons and my daughters to get married? Yes. Would it be better if my sons and daughters never get married and serve the Lord all the days of their lives? Yes. Can I make them? No. That's what he's saying. Trying to put your beliefs. I always get tickled because, especially when you see denominations, or it's amazing how the first generation or second generation, they wrote it, so they believe it. Does that make sense? In other words, that was their conviction with God. We don't wear ties. We don't do this. We don't wear jewelry. We don't dress this way. It sounds good, that first generation or two, because we all did it. We already were there, and all we're doing is making rules about what we like. The problem is when that second and third generation come along, and you try to tell them to live the way you believe. Now they stop loving God, and they can only love what you believe. And that's where it becomes wrong. That's what Paul's saying. You can't force them to believe something that, even though it may be a good thing, it may not be their thing. So then he who gives his wife to marriage does well, and he who does not give his marriage does better. A wife is bound by the law as long as her husband lives. But if her husband dies, she is at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But she is happier if she remains as she is. That seems strange. But he says, ladies, let me give you some advice, and it could be men too. When your mate does pass away, it will be instinctive sometimes to feel like, oh, I'm alone, I need somebody. Be very careful not to just rush into the next thing. Because if you serve the Lord and you love the Lord and you find a depth in the Lord, like Paul's talking about, you may find out that I'm happier having the freedom to do the ministry and the work now and not having to take care of and feed or to be taken care of. And especially as you get older and you're talking about remarriage, you're not marrying a 20 or 30-year-old person anymore. You're marrying a 60, 70-year-old person, a 50-something-year-old, and their health is not going to get better. It's going to get... So not only are you fixing to go back into bondage, but you're fixing to go in for the worst half of the bondage. So be careful. Not saying it's not something you should do, and I see people do it, it's wonderful. But be very careful, because you might want to think about the fact that you might want to give that energy to the Lord and not sitting at the house taking care of someone who's getting older. But she is happier if she remains as she is, according to my judgment. And I think I also have the Spirit of God. He says, I think I see this correctly. And I believe it. When you understand what he's trying to say and how he's trying to say it, he's trying to walk you through what it looks like to give your life to the Lord, if you're married or unmarried, in whatever state you're in. Now the question is tonight, when you walk out of this room, can you fulfill what you've been called to? Whatever state you're in right now, if you're a husband, if you're a wife, can you fulfill and be the person you're supposed to be? If you can, you bring God glory. If you can be single and be a single person, says, I don't really want to marry, I want to get, okay, as long as you can do that and not bring God shame, then wonderful. But if you say, well, you know, I mess up a lot, well, then you need to get married. Because the goal is to give God glory in whatever state you're in, single, married. So when you leave here tonight, the ultimate goal is how do I best bring God glory? How do I best bring God glory? Because that's our purpose. For me, when I was 20-something years old, it was best I get married. It just was. These 30-something years have been one of the most wonderful seasons of my life. Well, what would you do if something happened to Elise? I would live single the rest of my life. I don't burn. I'm almost going on 60 now. We're not where we used to be. Does that make sense? If I went out with somebody, it would don't be like, what restaurant would you like to go to? You know, it'd be like, that'd be the thrill of the evening. Oh, man. And that's not trying to be ugly. Paul is just trying to walk you through life and let you understand, don't use things of this world or people in the world to fulfill the things God called you to be. Does that make sense? Be happy in the state that God put you. And realize that the state that God put you is a beautiful place if you don't waste it. Don't waste what God has given you. If you've got somebody, that's a wonderful thing. If you don't have somebody, the time you can spend with God is a wonderful thing. Will you bow your heads? Father, as we walk through this book that you inspired and gave through the Spirit of God Paul to write, Lord, this is a lot of teaching that we don't ever hear. We don't ever hear spoken. And Lord, I just pray tonight that whoever watches this online or whoever hears it in this room tonight would hear it from the Spirit that it was meant. Maybe to help settle or answer questions or to allow God for you to speak to them and say, that's what I've been trying to tell you. That's what I've been trying to speak to you is what he said tonight. Father, use this. This is a tough teaching. It was tough for the Corinthians. And God, I don't want us to be people that leave wrecked marriages or bad history because I don't want to ruin and diminish your name. I want whatever place that you put us for us to bring you glory and honor. And I ask you that wherever state that we're in tonight, that we do that. That we bring you the highest honor right where we are. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. Give that old devil fits.